So, Empires of the Middle Ages here by SPI. Quite late on now in this game, which is, I'm playing quite a short game, but we're into round 13 out of 20, so we're well over halfway here. The Danes are, well, they've just conquered Wales quite recently, and they've now got control, or at least some control, although no claims on Norway and Sweden. The French have pushed down and started trying to work their way into the Iberian Peninsula down here, so they've taken Leon and they'll try and aim down here into Portugal and Spain. The Burgundian Empire is being chiselled out bit by bit down here on the Western Mediterranean, although they are being knocked about a bit by the Saracen raiders coming out of the seas here. You can see Provence there, which was once a thriving province for these people. For the Burgundians, there's a social state at the moment of -3, partly as a result of the raiders and partly due to some utterly incompetent ruling by a very poor administrator, so that's not going very well for them. The Poles are now extending up into this eastern Slavonic region. They've conquered Kiev. They're still struggling for income, but a little bit, but they've managed to force their way out there. Their leader just changed. They've got a 2-5-3 leader, so at least they've got an administrator, and they have the benefit of those tactical systems. So they have a 5-5-3 leader in effect, which is pretty potent. The Byzantine Empire is extending up here into the Balkans. It's largely given up on the sort of Middle Eastern area. The threat of magnates out of Syria running riot down in this area is just too great to make it really worthwhile putting effort in down here, so they'd rather extend out in this direction. And that leaves the German player who's kind of actually sandwiched in the middle, and it's quite difficult in this position to be completely surrounded, because whatever direction you go in, you feel like you're giving someone else an easy ride. So if they push up and contest things with Denmark, well, they're just letting France and Poland get an easy time, and if similarly they don't really want to lock horns with France, so it's quite difficult. But anyway, they're working their way down into this Italian region and trying to re-establish their empire down here. They've got Rome under some sort of control, even though the Saracen raiders just hit it, and they've got Tuscany to work with now, which they can get to out of Verona, and they'll try and push down into Naples probably, and maybe even pinch Apulia off the Byzantines if they can. So that's what's going on at this stage in the game. And the other thing is, it's starting to get reasonably noticeable that everyone's got a solid enough position that they have cash left at the end of their turn. So you can see here, for example, the French have 10 gold in their treasury. The Germanics have 8. The Danes have 5, and the relatively poor Poles have 5. Down here, the Byzantines have got 12 cash, and the Burgundians have got 8 at the moment. So people have now got a well enough established situation to have spare money left at the end of their turn, which is pretty much the first time that that's been the case. We're into round 16 then of Empires of the Middle Ages, and not wanting to talk the game down at all, I have enjoyed it, but I'm just about ready for it to end about now. We've got 5 rounds to go. This particular game goes up to round 20, and that for me is enough. The game is quite laborious in the sense that you get NPC characters, raiders and magnates come on. You deal them cards. You do lots of counting and assessing individual areas, adding up this social state number and the population number in the top right to see which one they like the look of attacking. Then you have to assess all those and find that there's 3 that you like, so you make a dice roll, then you flip a card to see what happens, then you adjust the marker on that area, then you do more counting, and then you make another dice roll and you adjust another marker, and then you try and work out to make sure you haven't missed anything, and then you go back and you do the next one and you do another marker, and then you go back and you've now got a whole different set of social states, and you start again with a lot more counting, and you look at all the possible places they could attack, and then you flip a card and then you adjust one of them up. And once you've done all that just for the NPCs, then you go around the table and you start doing that pretty much for all the players as well. They look at their empire, they look at what they might feasibly achieve, they look at how much gold they've got, which for most of the game isn't very much. They tax each of their areas, and if they tax it more than they've got fortifications, or if there's a language difference, or if there's a religious difference, then you have to add up lots of factors or work out or do mental arithmetic, which is quite simple, but lots of it all the time. Mental arithmetic: how much gold can I take from Flanders? Well, it's got 3 fortification, it's got a completely different language, that's a +2 on its rebellion, and I've only got a social state of 2. I can take a maximum of 2. If I can take 2, that's 4. I'd have to make a roll on the 1 table. I can take 1 for free. What do I want to take? Now, blah, blah, blah. Now, these have got a different language to me. That's a +1 because it's related, so are they the same? And you're doing that all the time. All the time. This mental up and down, and then you start taking your actions, and you're doing that again. You're going, okay, I'm doing conquest, I'm adding my leader combat stature, I'm adding my base area, where do I want to attack from, what do I want to risk, I'm adding up its social state, I'm adding up its fortifications, I'm adding up the language modifier, the religion modifier, and now I've got a number, and now I'm working out whether that number's good enough and whether I've got what gold I want to pay. It's going to cost me 2 to do it. How much more should I pay? And you're doing that for each of your 5 actions, and again, and then again for the next player, and again for the next player, and you do that round after round after round, and it's lots of these little microtransactions, each of which takes you lots of this mental arithmetic to count up. Now, what you get for all of that is quite a nice organic development of your empires, including the sort of trials and hardships of famine and heresy, and years of plenty, and raiders, and upstart emperors coming out of Syria, and Venice deciding to lay waste to southern Europe, and so on. You get a nice, like I say, organic rise and fall. In fact, what you'll see is areas early on in the game is that whole areas will start having, they'll have been hit with famine and they'll have low social state, and then they'll get some years of plenty and suddenly it'll be up above the normal, and then suddenly they'll get famine and it'll be back to the normal again, and you'll just see the sort of ebb and flow of different areas as the event deck cycles round, and it has a very plausible and charming kind of cyclical nature. So I like all that, but 20 turns of it or 20 rounds of it is enough. There's no way I'm playing 700 years of doing 700 years of this. There's not a big enough payoff in this ebb and flow to be worth 140 rounds of it. 20 is quite enough. Thank you very much. Anyway, that's that. Yeah, my cats agree as well. What am I doing at the moment? We've got no raiders. Thankfully, I'm saved the burden of doing any raiders or magnates this turn. So I'm just doing turn order and then continuing on. So just to have a look, the French are the overwhelmed. Well, the French look like they're doing really well, partly because they've got over 20 gold in the bank. And the reason for that is that they've got this 593 leader, and he's just allowing them to just absolutely, his administration skills mean that pretty much all their areas. Champagne is on a +2, Normandy's on its maximum +2, Ile-de-France +3, Anjou maximum +2, Aquitaine maximum +2, Burgundy's not here, Toulouse is probably on its maximum of +1. Let's see if it's no, it could go up another one. They've taken Lyon down here, but he's just so good at sorting this stuff out, so it doesn't cost him any money to do it, and so he just does ruling actions, pushes everything up to its maximum, fortifies it, and they cane in the cash. So they're in a really strong place. Germany just lost Rome to, I think they had another one of those leader dies, airless, unrest, lost Rome, and the Burgundians snuck in and stole it before they were able to do anything about it. They got Tuscany still in a horrible state. The Poles aren't doing too badly. In fact, they've gone on a mad conquest. They haven't got claims to these areas, but they've gone smashing through this East Slavonic language area, Smolensk, Kiev, Novgorod, and conquered it all. That's what they've been up to. Slowly growing down here with the Byzantines. And yeah, in the absence of raids, the Burgundian Empire isn't doing too badly either. Neither is the Danish Empire. To be fair, everyone's pretty solid. And I think, as I said at the start, I haven't gone out of the way with any of the powers being antagonistic. It just doesn't look it doesn't look like there's any payoff for smashing your head against another player and just giving everyone else a free ride because the two of you are knocking into each other. However, it'll be really interesting to see who comes out ahead with this very sort of, well, let's see what happens when we're all just left alone to grow our own empires. It'll be really interesting to see who comes out ahead in that, and then that would probably inform you, if you played again, as to who you need to be thinking about in future games. So yeah, kind of interested to see how the scoring works out at the end of this, to see who's done well and who hasn't. So here we are with Empires of the Middle Ages, and after 18 rounds, to be honest, given that I didn't have really much idea of what the scores were going to look like or anything, and that there was sort of handicap points to add in and all that kind of stuff, I just decided that 18 was as good a point to stop as 20, given that I was getting tired of the process of playing and was really interested at just seeing, right, how is everyone doing, and so I stopped and totted up the scores. Having done so, I don't really feel the need to restart, to play another 2 turns and do really gamey things to try and change the scoring. I don't think this is that kind of game. I think this is the kind of game where you almost have to play on instinct and try and improve your empire and try and improve your position, and then you work the scores out at the end and say, oh, that's interesting. But the gameplay is, and the narrative and the ebb and flow is what you play it for, not because you want a point more than someone else at the end. Because I really do think you could mess this game up quite royally if you started playing it for every last point. That doesn't seem to be the point. Anyway, the Danes ended up with a pretty solid British Empire there, and Scandinavia as well under their control. The Germans got very boxed in here in the centre. They did manage finally to get themselves slowly spreading back down into Italy, but as you can see, they'd lost Rome and they lost Lombardy from their original holdings and didn't really take anything to make up from that, perhaps maybe Brandenburg. The Poles did a great job. They took Hungary from the Byzantines. They were worried that the Byzantines would make a move on stealing Poland from them, so they warred over Hungary slightly, but mainly just expanded up into Russia. The Byzantines stayed still pretty much, just worked on improving their empire rather than expanding it, although they did obviously spread into the Balkans a little bit, but at the cost of losing some of their Mediterranean holdings. These guys, the Burgundians, who start very boxed in around here, actually did a fair job of spreading out into the Mediterranean. And the French, really fortified and solidified in France, and then towards the end rolled down and was starting to really cook down here in Spain, and had so much money stocked up that they could have pushed hard for a couple more turns and probably knocked over Cordoba and Granada as well, had they really gone for it. So yeah, that's the sort of final position, and the scores. You add up points for for claims and for the social state of your areas and stuff. So the Byzantines got 33 for their claims and 35 for their areas, for a total of 68 and 5 handicap points. Burgundy 24 for their claims, 27 for the social state of their areas, for a total of 51 but 30 handicap. Who's this? France 27 for claims, 45 for social state, plus 10 for their handicap. The Germanics, German Empire, 30 for claims, 39 for social state, no handicap. Danes 18 claims, 30 social state and 30 handicap. Poland 27 claims, 29 social state, also 30 handicap. Total scores then were pretty close. Poland 86, France 82, Burgundy 81, Denmark 78, Byzantium 73, and the Germans on 69. And yes, I could have played a couple more turns and they could have switched around slightly, but really I wouldn't have known. I'd have just gone, oh, so they did. So that's as good as anything for me. The Poles, I'd have put the French winning personally. They seem to be in a more powerful position, but the Poles nicked it by virtue of making the best of a very difficult starting position, whereas the French start with a very solid position and just expanded on it. The Germans not going anywhere and losing ground in terms of territories cost them. And you can see Burgundy, as seemed to be the case, was doing quite well, although their position always looked a bit precarious, with Denmark and Byzantium being solid. So there's the scores, and you can see, this position seems fairly well balanced, and the scoring says that it is fairly well balanced. There's only 15 points or so between top and bottom. So, okay, so that's really interesting, because what that says is that, if you manage your empire pretty well and grow it sensibly without going mad, you'll be there or thereabouts in the scoring. Even, if you're Germany or France, well, you just have to take some opportunity to expand, or if you're Germany, not have your Italian empire robbed off you. If you're France, just grow sensibly and drop down into Spain, and you'll be there or thereabouts, and so on. So it does look, from this initial play, as if, growing sensibly, trying to just build up, slowly creep forward in terms of your position and your income to the point where you're generating enough money to do something, is completely viable. And in fact, there's no need to go, bullying or, being really cutthroat as one of the bigger powers. And in fact, that's probably counterproductive, because you're costing yourself lots of money in very difficult actions, and leaving other people to do things much easier and more efficiently. So yeah, I was a bit worried about the idea of game balance here, and I suppose I'm still slightly tentative about saying that the thing's balanced or anything like that. One play, what do I know? But these scores are not looking so out of whack that I'm thinking, ye gods, you know, if the Germans had ended up on 40, I'd be thinking, God, they've got to do something completely different, you know, or if the Poles had ended up on 35, likewise, I'd be thinking, well, what are they supposed to do? But the scores here are suggestive of a game in which everyone played reasonably well, and certain things went against people and other people caught a few breaks. So, yeah, I think it's a really good game. 100 years or 20 rounds, you know, I've done 18. I know I cut it short by a couple, but I didn't want to play 2 more rounds that I just wasn't enjoying and slog through them and then go, thank God for that. I'd rather stop at the point where I'm still enthused and thinking about the game instead of waiting for it to end so I can play something else. So I'm happy to have stopped here and really enjoyed it. And I have to say that all the scenarios, with the exception of the Grand Campaign, do look about this long. So the Grand Campaign is more of a game kit than a game. It says start on the 2-player scenario and then kind of, you know, break down the empires and allocate them to people. And it just gives you ideas for how to create a Grand Campaign rather than being fully fledged rules for one, you know. Player or players who control the Frankish Empire shall divide his empire into 3 kingdoms. Each area in the kingdom must be connected directly overland to each area. You know, it's like, well, you know, run this kingdom for a while and then split it up 3 ways and then, you know, hold some votes on who goes where and leave some space for other people to come in and you'll figure it out. That's roughly the rules of the grand scenario. But the actual specified scenarios, you know, this is 100 years. The one I just played, Age of the Crusades, is, 65 years. Defeat in the East is 100 years. And the Twilight of the Middle Ages looks like it's about 80. So, yeah, you're looking at, you know, 12 to 20 rounds for a scenario of this. That seems about right. And, yeah, I think it's a really, really interesting design. It's beautiful to look at, and just slightly mechanically awkward, but the upside is the ebb and flow that the components produce, which probably wouldn't be replicated as well with bell curves on dice rolls and, you know, table lookups. So cool, very enjoyable, interesting game. Happy to break this one out again at some point, but there's just so much other stuff to play that I want to get cracking on something else.